So these are two essays which actually have the same topic. One is my own and one is the sample one. But they also have, in addition to the topic, they also have the same structure. So their structure in terms of how it's paragraphed and what the paragraphs are illustrating is actually identical. And that's sort of the approach that you want going into writing an essay, meeting these requirements. So first and foremost, your absolute first step should be to identify a rhetorical device online. And these can be found by just searching rhetorical device. Now, what you're looking for is not an article about how to use the rhetorical device. Rather, you're looking for an article that sort of debates on why the rhetorical device is important, or perhaps where it should be used or where it can be used. And you're looking for essays, you're looking for personal articles which people have wrote regarding these rhetorical devices. So in this case here, I've chosen anthropomorphism, which is just using, which is essentially just attributing human characteristics to non-living things. And this person here on the other side has chosen metaphor, and they wrote about the metaphor. So first and foremost, choose your rhetorical device, but make sure that there is a disagreement. Don't go into it. Um, don't go into it without acknowledging two authors who have a disagreement. You want agreements between both authors, but you also want disagreements. That is essentially going to lay the bedrock for your essay. So here you'll notice that the first paragraph essentially talks about one's own personal definition of the rhetorical device. So after you've found a rhetorical device which two people disagree and agree on, it's important that they do both. Then you go ahead and you write about you write about your own definition. Now this is just paraphrasing perhaps definitions that you found online. But after doing so, and this is actually what I did as well, the first opening is just, what is the definition in your own words? And immediately you can segue into introducing the two essays. You want the names of the essays, and you want the person who wrote it, the name of the person who wrote the essay. So you can see that it says in the essays. I chose in the articles because they were articles, but I think one of them was an essay. So here you're introducing the authors, and you're introducing the the names of the essays, and then you write a brief description about what each essay does, and what each author has written about. So here you can, after you've provided your own definition, you can see that the person has introduced both essays, and then they've acknowledged that that, for instance, Murray's essay was about this particular aspect, and Aldrich's essay was about this particular aspect. It was about function theory. And Middleton Murray's essay was about art in the human form. So it's like a brief acknowledgement about what the actual essay is about. And you can see that I've done much of the same thing, where I've introduced the authors, I've introduced the essays, and then in addition, I've talked about, and this, I did it a little more than I should have, but I talked about what the essays mean, and what they are inherently, right? What they talk about. And it's just a hint. So as we move on, you immediately segue into talking about the actual essay, and you choose one author. So here I've chosen one author. Here this person has chosen one author as well. They've chosen one author, and they summarize the essay in a way. But you want to summarize it so that it's relevant to a point that you're going to make later on. And I'm going to explain this in a little depth, but you summarize. So I've summarized one of the two authors' essays, and this person has summarized one of the two authors' essays. And that actually, so my summarization goes till about here, or actually it goes till about here. And their summarization, let's see, for according to John, it goes around here. So they're presenting the stance of one particular author, and then they go in to present the stance of another particular author. So, but not, they aren't only just explaining the stance, they're also adding some additional interpretation, or at least I have. You don't need to, but I have. So after describing the stance of the author, I've added some additional interpretation, or what I think is important about what the author has said. Again, this person hasn't done so, but I don't think you actually have to. But it is a good it is a good way to earn some extra points. So far you introduced the rhetorical device, and you introduced both the authors and both the essays, a brief summary about what they're about, and then you segue into a summarization of a person's essay, and then you follow that with another summarization of the next person's essay. And of course, you want to quote accurately where particular sentences were used. And this part's easy because you can just, copy paste some quotations, and that'll work. And you can see here that after they've introduced both these essays, they've acknowledged that both essays were different, but they were also very similar. So this is a sort of a unification process. It's like tying it all together, where not only do you illustrate how both essays were different, but you also illustrate how both essays were similar and what they agreed on. So you want to hint about what they disagreed on, and you want to hint about what they agreed on. And then ultimately, you want to provide your conclusion on the agreement and disagreement. So you can see that this person says amid the difference, while I say while the difference in opinion between both writers are self-evident. So it's sort of acknowledging that both had some points that they agreed with, and they had some points that they disagreed with. It is not your job to pass a judgment on who's right. I think that's important. So clearly, my interpretation of clearly I had wrote a little more regarding perhaps regarding the agreements and disagreements. But ultimately, you pose your own opinion about the matter, a very generic opinion. Um, you know, what you think about the rhetorical device and about the disagreements and agreements that were discussed. So just to recap here, you want to essentially have your own definition of the rhetorical device, introduce two authors, two essays, hint about what the essays are about, and you also want to acknowledge that perhaps there were some differences and there were some similarities. And then you segue into talking about what one author proposes or what one author talks about. And then you do the same thing for the other author, perhaps with a little interpretation at the end. And then you acknowledge that both agreed and disagreed to some extent regarding certain matters. And after doing so, you can keep writing about their agreements and disagreements, and then you just provide your own opinion.